pain is required or mandatory, but suffering is optional. I was loving life, loving what I was doing, but I just felt so tired. I had crazy insomnia. Something just felt off and wrong. And so I was always relentlessly searching for things that would make me feel better. But the ironic part about it is that it's using all of this modern stuff to ironically revert ourselves back or create conditions before all of this stuff. It's the little things that you do consistently that can really have the biggest effects.
Well, I am here today with Melanie Avalon, who is a very unique, outstanding woman in this world of health and high-level wellness. And we're going to get right into it right out of the gate. So, Melanie, I would love to hear from you, who you are today, what level you're at in all the things that you've learned, how you ended up getting into this space, because it's so rare for people to be here. And we're a tiny, tiny fraction of a percent of the universe. But we have the gold, and I know you've got some very serious golden nuggets to share with us. So if you could give us a quick snapshot of that information, it would be wonderful.
Sure. And thank you so much for having me, Ian. I'm so excited to be here. And I have so many thoughts based on what you just said right now, especially the it being a small community. I forget that so much because to me, it feels so expansive and I'm meeting so many people, but then you go out into the quote real world and so many people don't even know about all of this biohacking stuff. And it blows my mind because I realize I'm like in a fishbowl that feels bigger than I think it is. If that makes sense. But yeah, to answer your question. So I first got into this whole world, it's a kind of a common story due to my own health issues and struggles and challenges. It's actually two parts. One, so actually before the health issues and everything, I was always trying different diets growing up, and you and I were just talking before this about, dietary choices and effects from that. So I was always trying things and everything never really had a lasting effect or felt like I was on a roller coaster of sorts. Then I first found low carb, and that was the first time that doing low carb and keto where I was trying something to lose weight. And I actually saw so many benefits beyond that. And I was like, oh, there's something going on here. Like, this is not just about weight loss. And then from there, I found intermittent fasting. And this was over a decade ago. It wasn't a popular concept back then. And so fasting every day came off as very strange to people. And at that time, I was living in LA. I was doing background acting on different movies and TV sets. So every single day I was meeting tons of new people, and I was being faced with the situation where we would go to lunch and I wouldn't be eating and I would get so many questions. And at that point I was like, I need to just write a book or do something where I can just give people information. So I wrote a book. I started a podcast to start sharing information. And so that was the intermittent fasting piece. And then the whole biohacking world and where we are today, which I know was your original question. I started experiencing health issues. So fatigue was the main thing. I graduated from college at USC in LA from film and theater. I was loving life, loving what I was doing, but I just felt so tired. I had crazy insomnia. Something just felt off and wrong. And so I was always relentlessly searching for things that would make me feel better. And I started doing all the things that today we see as quote biohacking. So, like red light therapy and blue light blocking glasses. And this was all before any of this was even remotely a popular thing. And I'm the type of person where I love learning. I love self-experimenting. And I love telling people what I've learned, not to convince them to try anything, but just if something really benefits my life, I just want everybody to know. And so I'm actually really grateful. I think about this a lot. I'm so grateful that I'm born in a time when there's this concept of being an influencer, which I know can sound a little, I don't know. I think some people think influencers are shallow or selling out, but for me, it's literally perfect because I get to do what I just said. I get to learn, experiment on myself. And then what I love, I share it with the people, and it brings me so much happiness. And I love, seeing other people's experiences and all those things. And to answer your original question about where am I today? So at my lowest of lows, it was not good. It was not good. I had heavy metal toxicity. So I had mercury poisoning. My blood levels of mercury were around 30, which is very high. I had severe anemia to the point that I was hospitalized. And I just entered like a really dark time where I felt like my health was, I just didn't have health. And I call it my dark time. I think I reflect fondly on it. And, and so from then I remember thinking when I was in that point, and during that point, cause I had launched at least my first podcast at that point. And I remember I was too tired physically to actually even go out in the world. Like I had, it's interesting. I had a serving job. So I was out in the world, but I energetically, I didn't want to see people. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to put makeup on. I just wanted to wait tables and podcast. And, I felt like I was the Little Mermaid without although she didn't have her voice. So I felt like I felt like I was the opposite of Little Mermaid, where I was hiding my physicality and hiding and using my voice. But I remember thinking during that point in time, if I ever again go out to like a dinner with people and take pictures and put on social media, I will know that I am like at a different place. And that it's crazy to me that was such a milestone in my head because I was at such a low point health wise. And it seemed like such an insurmountable mountain. And now I have to go out like once a week. I'm still an introvert, so I can't go out all the time. But now I'm so grateful that I've come out of that. And I love going out and seeing people and all the things. So it's been a journey. Yeah. I'm not sure if I answered all the questions there, but that's a brief snapshot.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, it's interesting how you refer yourself to as an introvert. I am similar, but if you get me into talking about the things that I love and with people who love to talk about those in an interactive conversation, I'm a total extrovert. It's like, and I think you probably saw the same. If somebody engages and is open and you get to share openly, who you are and what you're all about, you're more of an extrovert, right?
Yeah. So I think for me, I mean, 100% with what you said with talking about passionate things, I'm not shy at all. So it's not that aspect of it. I've heard it said with introversion versus extroversion that introverts, when they are in social situations, even if they enjoy it, it's draining to them ultimately. Like they have to come home and
Mhm.
like rest and recover. And that's
Yep.
me versus
Mhm.
like an extrovert that gets energy from it. Like I remember in college, I was living with the most extroverted female ever, and she would go out every single night. And I was like, how do you do that? But like for her, that was energizing. So
Mhm.
that she's like definition extrovert. I'm introverted.
Yeah, I might have maybe in that sense I'm a bit of an extrovert because I get huge energy from being engaged in conversations, but I don't enjoy large crowds. And I'm
Mm.
never looking to be the center of attention at a party or anything like that. It's more of like the intimate conversations where you can really get into some good quality time with people and share the information that makes all the difference. And that's one of the things we're going to do today is that to find out from you what you've learned about the human body, especially as a female, because a woman's body is, in my estimation, just from observation, your body is infinitely more intelligent than a male body because your body could have a child. It has hormonal changes throughout your life. And women are far superior at reading their body. They know that when something is affecting them, they can usually go and find it out pretty quick. So what are the things that you have focused on primarily to reset your foundation, to get out of that fatigue, to get into that good, sustainable, energy that you've got and be in equilibrium where you're chill, but yet you have lots of energy?
Yeah, so many things. Well, addressing the acute health issues for me was really important, and something I'm actually really grateful for now is every time I got a new diagnosis of a problem or thought I had a certain problem, because as you know, or people may know, you get in rabbit holes and you get convinced that you have everything.
Mhm. Right.
Um, so with all of that, it really led me to really research all of these different things that can happen to our bodies. And it's really helped create this, wealth of knowledge with the podcasting and everything where I'm interviewing people. And when I have, get questions from listeners, like I feel like I can really relate to people with empathy about that. So I'm literally grateful for every diagnosis. But on an from an acute perspective, I did have to actually address the actual issues. So like the heavy metal toxicity, mercury toxicity, I needed to do chelation. Although I
Mm.
think I don't, if I could go back, I would do it a little bit differently because I think I went too intense. Like I was doing pharmaceutical chelation with EDTA and DMPS and DMSA, and so I think I did too much too fast without proper mineralization support.
Yep.
Um, so I would do something different there, but I did get the mercury out, so yay for that. And then for the anemia, I literally had to it was bad. I had to get blood transfusions and iron infusions. So
Mhm.
addressing the actual those issues. Beyond that, focusing on sleep is so important to me. Sleep and energetic boundaries in general with everything that I'm doing. So in the sleep world, I'm so obsessed with sleep. I have my whole, and I'm a night owl. It's my circadian rhythm is very not normal. But I make sure I do all the things to really support that. So blue light blocking glasses at night to help, have the correct light exposure. I light my apartment with red light at night. It looks like the red light district. I have my wind down routine, which does include wine. Maybe we can talk about that later.
Mhm.
With the actual sleep environment, I use a cooling mattress. I make sure that I use blackout curtains to keep everything dark. I do the mask. I do all the things. I use my magnesium nightcap, which is magnesium 3 and 8 at night. So
Mhm.
locking in and addressing my sleep was really a game changer for me. And then the energetic boundaries that I'm speaking of, I'm a planner. Like it blows my mind people that don't plan. More power to them, and I'm sure that's a completely different experience of life. For me, I make sure I plan everything, and I make sure I respect my, like I said, I keep using this word energetic boundaries, but I make sure that I know how much time and energy I need to do the things that I want to do, and I put in enough for that, and I make sure that I have the amount of social engagement that works for me, the amount of work that works for me. I'm a workaholic, so I have to be good with that. But I think boundaries and establishing boundaries. They call them like warm boundaries. So establishing boundaries before you need to establish them, so then you're not establishing them out of anger or out of needing them really intensely at that moment. And because I think that's when people associate the word boundaries with being cold or closing doors, and I think it's more just self-care uh preemptively before it gets to a point where you actually need to get it retroactively. um yes, I can go on, but do you have
Well,
more?
well, to that point, because let's talk about the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the last 10 years, how much has your life changed with the people you've attracted into your space and the people who have removed themselves out of your space?
Mm. That is so interesting. So what's interesting, you said in the like past 10 years.
Mhm.
Um, so that's when I started podcasting. And despite this, what I call my dark time, um, I've always, I really appreciate, enjoy, love people. And I've always realized the importance of, that really cliche phrase about surrounding yourself with the, I don't know, like the six people that you want to be like. I've always really noticed the importance of that. So even when I was exhausted and not actually going out in the world and seeing people physically, I was always surrounding myself community-wise with people I wanted to be with. And that was at least after like graduating college. So um honestly, in the past 10 years, it's a growing but similar group of core people. And I'm also the type of person where I'm very trusting. I love meeting people. And I very quickly let people into my like close circle. And then but I'm also very protective of it. So I've been called, I interviewed somebody, is it John Levy, I think. He has a book all about it's called You're Invited, and it's about how connecting people to other people. And I think that's like one of a type of person that I am, where I love people. I love connecting people to people, and I've always really valued that. So the change that you mentioned has been more a growing through the years rather than
Mhm.
a completely like switching out of people,
Right.
if that makes
So
sense.
it's been like more organic, where it just sort of naturally happened without you having to intentionally purge or just go out and just look for people. That's what I found. It was very organic. And
Yes.
what I think is a resonance thing. You can tell right away if someone is at a certain vibrational level with their spirituality, their mental, their emotional IQ, and their physical intelligence and physical health. And it is an attraction thing. And I think, what you mentioned right out of the gate about the small, tiny world we live in. But to us, it's a very big world because that's where we're always at. I always think, well, everybody's like us, right? But,
Yeah.
immediately as soon as you go into the mainstream, it's not even close. And so, what have you seen effect wise from your influence in that positive way of people picking up on your resonance? Like when you meet someone for the first time in the space, and how have you seen you inspire people with your knowledge, with your presence, with your physicality, like just being there, that energy, that body language, and the radiance, and your presence in the room?
Yeah, these are such great questions, by the way. Oh, and really quick question on the going back to the fishbowl. What I really notice that that I'm really just seeing this fishbowl that I'm in is I go every day to Restore Hyper Wellness. They're like a chain. This is not like a plug or anything, but they're like a national chain where they have like cryotherapy and red light and sauna. They have all
Mhm.
the things that we do.
Yes.
When I go in there, and because I'll go there when I'm traveling too, I meet so many people who still like I can't just like name drop. You would think in that sort of situation I could just name like people I've interviewed and like have common conversation, but so many people they even the people going there. My point is, even the like normal quote normal people going there don't know about this whole biohacking world, which I find really interesting. Um, but to go back to your question about the impact on people and things like that, um, it's so I've realized this is not a direct answer to your question, but in general, I do feel a high vibe, like you were saying, with my life and with meeting others. And I found that when you talk to people, you can pretty quickly lift them up as well. And if I'm ever in real life, also tangent about that. I'm currently reading The Simulation Hypothesis, which is all about us maybe being, I'm going to interview him on my show. So right now I'm like steep in that. I'm like, is this real life? Are we in a simulated reality? I don't know. But in any case, in the real life and this reality, whenever I meet, every now and then I'll meet somebody where you feel like you can't like their vibe is so low and like that you can't lift it up. And when that happens, I'm like, oh, this is a challenge. Like I'm like, I gotta like we gotta get a smile or something here.
Right.
But as far as it resonating with other people, I think the biggest things are it's interesting. I've started on the intermittent fasting podcast, which is the podcast I've had for the longest time. I've had it almost 8 years. Usually it's just listener Q&A, but we've started doing a format where I actually interview listeners about their stories. And that has been so interesting and so amazing. And because I get to hear all these people who, I, they've been listening to me for like 7 years. So, I mean, they feel like they know me. I mean, I feel like I know them because I feel like I can quickly connect with them, but I get to hear about how them just listening to my experience, in particular with intermittent fasting with that show, how they were able to, integrate it into their lives. And so many people, I think, have found me through that show about intermittent fasting, but because I tend to talk about all the things all the time, all the biohacking things, people will always tell me how they fall down the rabbit hole too, like because it's really a rabbit hole. And yeah, I just love hearing people's experiences about what works for them and what doesn't. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's how we learn from each other because you're inviting people in. I love what you talked about inviting, and John Levy's book. I haven't read it, but I will. So when someone invites you to tell them something that you've learned and they're interested and intrigued with you, it's so much of a better flow of conversation rather than us trying to find someone to tell them what we've learned, because then the walls go up, right?
Hmm.
And yes, having the open doors that are welcoming you and myself and people like us to just share. Really, is what it's doing. We're not. I'm not out to teach. Everybody goes, "Oh, you're a teacher." Well, no, actually, I'm not. I'm a learner, and then I just share what I learned. And you're very much of an open book in that sense. I feel it because you're not trying to come up with something. You're just looking for direction to be connected with information that really makes the difference. And then you will employ it, find out if it actually works. And like the intermittent fasting, I did a whole ton of intermittent fasting for a long time. Have you ever done any dry fasting?
I have not. Well, so dry fasting is interesting. We get asked about that a lot. You know what? I don't think I have consciously. Maybe I've tried it in like one day where I was like, I'm gonna dry fast, but no, I haven't done it as like an actual, intense protocol. Have you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
I
And
have
you have
not.
to prep. Yeah, you have to prep your body. You've got to do,
Mhm.
the lemon juice and the baking soda, and you got to get your kidneys ready to go because your kidneys do not like dry fasting. They just don't like it.
Mm.
But when you prepare them, then your kidneys can actually cleanse themselves and get the stuff out because you're taking the load entirely off the system, 100%. And I've done dry fasting. I planned on doing some 5-day dry fasts, but because I'm the CEO of a company that we're a primary manufacturer and I've got everybody pulling at me from every direction, I was never able to get enough space. And it's not that I couldn't keep going, but I'd run out of saliva talking too much. Because if you're going to do it, no talking. Like, I really want to do one of those where you go into total darkness for days at a time and do a
Hmm.
dry fast. And in that situation where don't have your telephone, there's nobody bothering you, they know your time off. If there's an emergency, of course, they get a hold of you. But, the chances of emergency is very, very rare that it would require to interrupt it. But I really would love to try that. Now, I'll just tell you my experience on the dry fasting side is within about a day and a half, it would just get this incredible smoothness and quietness when I would lay down to go to sleep. It was like I was in another world of total peace and tranquility. And I would have the best dreams and the deepest sleeps. And I would keep going. And I just felt better and better and better doing it. And you get a lot of energy because you're starving all of the microbes from their food completely. There's just nothing to eat. And so they die off en masse, but they don't die off in a dangerous way because they don't have the fluid to release like a parasite or a microbe or a pathogen. They don't have the fluid and they just kind of dry up and die. And then you expel them without getting sick. And, I found out the Russians, like these guys are crazy. So they'll go 16 days dry fasting. It's like, really? And some of them are so intense, they won't even allow any water to touch their body for that whole time at all. Like it's called a dry fast because you will absorb moisture through your body from the air. If you go into a tub of water or a hot tub, you're going to absorb a lot of fluid. And so this is the dry fast. So I did the dry fasting. I made it up to 3 days doing that a couple of times. But yeah, it was a fabulous experience, really. I think there's something to it. It needs to have a deeper dive, but you do have to do it responsibly and safely, and you have to build up to it. It's definitely preparing a couple of weeks leading up to each time that I would do that. And I was fortunate to meet people who knew those simple little hacks that you had to do to make sure your body's prepped. But yeah, you might want to check into it sometime.
Yeah. And how many days did you say that you did it for? Or you've done it?
Well, 3.5 was the longest
Hmm.
because I ran out of saliva and I had to talk. I
Yeah.
wasn't, that's the one thing I didn't prepare properly, is to make sure that the teams were all in place and there was no reason they'd have to talk to me. But I'm like you, I guess I would be called a workaholic because I don't even consider it work. Just like you don't, your
Yes.
work isn't really work, it's your joy. And so the more you learn, the more you get to learn. But the main thing that I have noticed that works really, really well for all of us is getting what I call a clean signal to noise ratio. So that instead of having too much information, you've got more definitive. You've got more of a very clear message that has no more static around it at all. And then people can pick that up a lot easier. That's how I learned, was by because it's such a crowded, noisy place. Even the biohacking world is very crowded. it's very noisy, really. When you think about all the devices, all the things you could do, all the things people are trying. And the biohacking term, which was coined by Dave Asprey, I guess he would be considered the granddaddy of it all. I met Dave in 2012. So he's pioneered a lot of that concept and had his bulletproof conferences and all those things back in the day. And so, but hacking is sort of a weird word in a way, because if I came to install your kitchen in your new house and I called myself instead of a high-end kitchen artisan installer, I'm like a kitchen hacker. You're going to go, let me see, is it going to be square and bolted together right, or what? You know? Mm-hmm. What do you think about that term?
About the word biohacking?
Like I call it bio-optimization myself now.
That's a good word. That's a good word. It's funny because people debate what it actually is so much, and it's a very nebulous word. And I know when I started doing more like press pieces and articles and things like that, I realized I really needed to crystallize what I considered biohacking to be. What I see it to be, and I do agree that the word hack has an interesting connotation to it. I see it as very ironic because I think I believe it's like optimizing your own biology and your performance and your experience of the world using modern technology and supplements and tricks and protocols and all the things. But the ironic part about it is that it's using all of this modern stuff to ironically revert ourselves back or create conditions before all of this stuff. So, it's doing things to create hermetic stressors in our bodies because today we live just a sedentary, almost stressless physically lifestyle. And it's like I'd mentioned earlier how I'm a crazy night owl. So it's adjusting my environment to mimic a more natural circadian rhythm. That's the way I see it. So it is it's like hacking. It's hacking life. It's not really, yeah, it's not really like, I guess it is hacking your body a little bit because you're adjusting that environment that you're in. It isn't by optimization is a good version though. I like that.
Yeah, well, there's even a company called, friends of mine called their company Biooptimizers.
Yeah, biooptimizers.
You could say bioregeneration, but what I think the term hacking comes in really cool is that it's like a fast track. You're finding the fastest, most efficient way. It's like a hack. It's like if you're going to hack a game, you're finding the best way to win and, get through it faster. And so all the little hacks and the code cracking a code, right? You crack the code on the heart health, or you crack the code on the brain, or whatever system, all the 15 different systems that are running synergistically. But I also noticed in this space that there is an element of suffering that is required at certain times in order to get through that firewall because the body is so compromised. Like what you had to go with the mercury poisoning. You had to go through a period of suffering with the EDTA and the DMSA and those different chelations that you had to do, which were actually harsh on the body. And as you said now, if you went back to go there again, you would do it a little differently. And you would bring in a lot more minerals and a lot more bioavailable elements that would support that and do it better. I went through that whole, they called it, what did they call it? Metabolic therapies. They called it, it was sort of a nice term instead of chelation. But I did all the chelators, and they were expensive, some of them. I went down to Tijuana and then into Rosarita. And it was in there where I met these different people who were doing that medical tourism thing. And it did deplete me. I had to recover from that later. But how much have you experienced, like suffering level, knowing the suffering was good for you, but how much suffering have you had during this journey?
Yeah. So, well, on a small temporal level, I was actually having this conversation like last week. So I mentioned earlier how I go to Restore Hyper Wellness and I go every day to do cryotherapy. And it's funny because I was talking with the woman there and she was asking me, if it gets easier, like if I have fun or if I enjoy, being in the cold chamber. And I was like, no. Like when I'm in there, I'm like, I dread going in every day. I don't have fun when I'm in there, but I feel really good when I come out. And she's like, well, we got to change that. She was saying like, you need to reframe, like, of course you probably should be liking it. Like maybe you can like it someday. I'm like, I don't think I actually have to like it. Like I like I think there's something to experiencing things that don't necessarily feel good, but you know they're good for you, and it's actually okay to not enjoy that. And it's actually really helpful because when I'm in that cryo chamber every day, I literally hear my and see it's kind of meditative. I'm not actively doing meditation during it, but I hear the voice in my head like complaining, like a little kid being like, I don't want to be in here. I want to get out. This is cold. But I'm like, whatever, like you have to be here. So, and I think that's actually, a good thing. And I wouldn't call that suffering though at all. As far as like actual suffering, it's like there's so many cliche quotes about it. Like, what is it? Pain is required or mandatory, but suffering is optional. I really think suffering comes from the your thoughts about what you're experiencing. So cryotherapy, not pleasant, but I'm not suffering because I know I want to be there. And even during that quote dark time that I keep referring to, I I I don't think I was always really hopeful, and I always knew I would find my way out. And you mentioned earlier how we're not working because it's our joy. I've always felt like I've had a purpose. I've always seen things that I'm working towards. So even then, I just knew that that was the point I was in. I remember at one point, my therapist at that time was like, this is a liminal space. And I was like, that is such a freeing concept. Like, so if you're at a place where it's not where you think you want to be and you're going, you're intending to be somewhere else, you can see it as a liminal space. Like it's a transition and it's okay to
Mhm.
be there. That conversation actually came out. It's very specific, but I love in general. I love like Christmas and holidays. And when I was in that like dark place, I was like, I don't even want to listen to Christmas music right now because I don't want to associate this thing that I love so much that's really cherished to me with this really intense, physically dark time that I'm in. And so I was like so torn. I was like, do I listen to Christmas music or do I not? Which I know sounds like such a little problem, but that's when my therapist was like, you know what? You don't have to listen to Christmas music. That's okay. And this is a liminal space. So for suffering, I'd rather project all of that interpretation on those experiences if I can. You really don't have to suffer. I really think it's your mindset about it.
Right. And it's all about the why as well, because I found that there was a massive psychological component to this. So when I was 46 years old, which was 20 years ago, I hit a wall completely. And that was it. I mean, I was literally, my body was going to be expiring within 36 months on the trajectory that I was on. I had no knowledge whatsoever. I was being told by the doctors in Toronto and the specialists that I had a very big problem. I had a huge tumor in my perineum. I had heart
Wow.
disease. And 3 years from that, I had a big liver problem. And so it was like, okay, I don't like anything they're offering me. I don't appreciate any of this. I'm suffering like crazy. And I think every single thing is my responsibility. And it's my lack of knowledge. I haven't taken responsibility. I've been giving my power away to people all the time, saying, please help me. I got this problem. What do I do? Instead of realizing that it was just everything. It was an accumulation of all the lack of knowledge and wisdom. And so I made a commitment at that time because I actually turned down all the doctor's advice, including my older brother, who was a medical doctor for 30 years. And I just told them all, I said, I'm quite convinced now that this is me. And they said, well, you can't blame yourself. I said, no, I'm not interested in blaming anybody. I'm done with that. I used to blame everybody for everything and blame myself for stuff. That doesn't work at all. What's the point of that? And I said, I will, if, because I couldn't say I was for sure, because I asked to be led, be led to people like you, people who have knowledge, people who have been through it, ahead of me. And I knew you existed. I knew there were people in the world who had the top level of understanding about natural health, but I don't know who they are. I have no idea how to find them. And there was a very big world, and how do you discern that when you know nothing? But I wanted to be led to them. And so I said, well, okay, whatever it takes, if I have to spend money, if I have to have a whole bunch of fun, if I have to travel, if I have to suffer, if I have to go through trials, I'm open. And at that point, I set myself up for success because I just said, whatever it takes. I have no idea what's going to be required of me. And I had to go through intense suffering because I was going to die. So I had to go through all these things, and I was being told, you're going to do this, this, this. I'm going, really? Whoa, okay, that sounds really intense. And it was. But then because I bought into it, I said, okay, I'm in. It didn't matter how much it was rough times, which there were some very rough times. I actually thought I was going to die. In fact, a couple of times I thought, if I would have realized it was going to be this bad, I wouldn't have done it. But very, very few people on this earth are in that compromised position who are actually willing to go through that. Most men in their 40s will die if they get what I had. They will just die. They will get the surgeries. I watched both of my uncles when I was 20 years old. They both died, and they were on my mom's side of the family. They were her two younger brothers. They were 51 and 54 years old. They got diagnosed with various different types of cancer. They did everything they were told. They took all the treatments in 1978, and they died right on time. And exactly within a year. Like 2 days apart, literally 2 days apart. It was so crazy. A high impact to the family, high impact to me. So I remember back, I went, well, that's what they went through. Here we are in 2004 at the time. We must have far greater knowledge now, but nope. The medical institutions offer the same thing. And so someone told me once, they said, well, a doctor's job is to extend death. It's not to extend life. It's to extend death. You're going to die, so they try to extend it. Well, what's the point? So getting into extending life is what you and I are all about, and our whole associates and all our colleagues and collaborators are all about extending life that has a higher quality of life into the future. Because the paradigm is really people get older and they start to lose their health as they get older. And they're trying to maintain their health. Well, flip that over completely. You become how much more valuable to the world you're in right now with your knowledge and experience over the last 10 years than you were 10 years ago. So you are actually kind of obligated to the world to keep staying along for 10 years at a time and 10 years and just keep repeating that 10 years increasing, where in every category in your body, you're getting a little bit healthier every single day. Now, how much have you seen that in your experience in the last 10 years where you just continue to get healthier?
Very, and it's so interesting because thinking about it now, because I can see myself when I was at that really low point and I see myself now, and it's so interesting. It's like, how was I moving forward? Was it in jumps and spurts and leaps? Was it, slow by slow, or, day by day, small amounts? It's, you know what it's like? This is such a weird analogy. It's like sometimes I wash my hands and like your hands are wet right after you wash your hands. And then they're dry. You never realize the point when they became dry. I think about that. It really makes me think a lot. But you go from having your wet hands to they're just dry, but you never see that transition point. And I think that's the way it's been in my health journey. And that it's hard to pinpoint. There's the really specific things, like when I got the blood transfusion, which was a game changer. Oh my goodness. They not like your situation, but they told me when I walked in that I was about to die. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize. I felt like I was dying. I didn't realize I actually could die. So things like that did have that was a big jump forward where I can say, yes, I made a big improvement there. But everything else over, the past 10 years or so, it's hard to see. It's hard to see while it's happening, but it's also like how I think about this a lot too. You can have an ailment that affects you and it's so present and it's all you think about. And you're so aware of it, be it, joint pain or brain fog or, whatever it may be, some skin issues. But when it's gone, it's hard to notice the absence of things. You just, I feel like we don't as much notice when the bad things went away as we notice when the bad things are there, if that makes sense. But but every now and then you're like, oh, do what?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's a perfect analogy. And the hands drying is very cool. And people, when they get well, they forget that they weren't well And often they'll go back into that same habit pattern that brings that problem back again to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So there's stages. There's stage 0, toxicity. That's the place to be. Stage 1 and 2, you don't even notice. Stage 3, you're going to notice it. It's like stage 0, deficiency. You don't notice it. In stage 1 and 2, you don't notice it. But stage 3, it's like magnesium deficiency or iodine deficiency, or like you said, iron deficiency. Then it shows up at stage 3. It's critical. If you go to stage 4, you are dead, actually. And so the goal is to get to stage 0 to take it all the way, which comes back to the psychological side of why do we do what we do. I wouldn't have anything to do with suffering if there wasn't a big result, a payback, where I'd be willing to go through it, because getting certain things out of the body, if it's really up there, you've got to go through quite a bit. And it is a rapid change at that point. But the analogy I often use, and I see the sunlight is shining on me in a very interesting way, it's coming through these windows. I'm standing in front of Lake Ontario, and 45 miles across the lake is Rochester. I'm literally right on the shore, where in this house I'm in. So the sun's pretty, it's not getting blocked by anything. But it's like going like a car on a road, and it's 10 miles to drive. If the road is completely flat, there is no difference in that 10 miles at all. But if you take it just 1 degree angle down versus 1 degree angle up, you can't see that. You could even put the car in neutral. There's so much friction in the tires with the weight of the car, it won't even move. Won't roll back, won't roll forward. But you drive it, and when you get down to the end of the 10 miles, if you do the math on it, I measured it as 875 feet difference above with 1 degree versus 1 degree down in 10 miles. It's like, that's a skyscraper, 875 feet. That's a big building. So that's the whole thing. Is what I love to do is just find those little 1 degree ups all the time. So you're not having to do anything too radical. I was extremely radical because I was on like a 45 degree angle down 20 years ago. But to get that back and then just be gentle, just let your body adapt and acclimate and not like, man, you go through healing crises, there's nothing worse. I do not appreciate healing crisis unless somebody's literally going to die right away. Okay, they're going to go through it. But just that nice, gentle, every single day. What have you employed in your life? What are the big things you're doing now that made that little degree difference where you just started to see a steady, continuous improvement? Because like we talked about sleep, but I have some other things.
Yeah, no, I love this question so much. I am a big proponent of, it's kind of like what you were talking about earlier with optimizing of time. We were talking about biohacking and how it's, getting, this is not exactly what we said, but something about like getting the most bang for your buck in these things time wise. And I am all about the little things that you do consistently rather than like you were saying, having to do this, huge upheaval of something, energy wise. And so I do so many things in my life that I really do see the benefits of. And these are going to be pretty specific. But for example, like I talked earlier about our modern sedentary environment. So just things as little as like keeping the air that I live in really cold all the time. Like there's actually a lot of benefits to that. And there's studies on how it can activate brown fat, and it actually can lead to, when people need to lose weight, if they're in a more cold environment all the time, like it has a really beneficial effect. It's funny because, so like I literally wear the same thing every day. It's funny because in my daily life, I have like 5 copies of this black, I'm wearing it now, this black halter dress. If you see me on podcasts, I'm always wearing the same thing. And that part of that is decision fatigue. Actually, that would be one of the things. That's an example of not having to make a decision every day about what to wear. I just put on the same thing every day. And I used to think I was weird, but then I realized a lot of the highest achievers, like Steve Jobs did that, Obama, like it's like a thing to wear the same thing every day, with the exception of when I'm going out, then I wear like a new dress every time. But wait, where am I going with this? So basically the idea, so I wear the same dress every day. Even in the winter when it's cold outside, I don't put on warm clothes. I still just dress like it's summer. And that gives me a lot of, beneficial hermetic stress from the environment. People stare at me, but that's okay. And so that's one example. Another example is just making everything in my life as heavy as possible. So I replaced all of my like dishes and everything that I use when I'm eating with um, cast iron.
Mm.
So when and you wouldn't think would make that big of a difference, but you'd be surprised, especially because I do like a one meal a day eating pattern every night. So I'm eating for like 4 hours. So everything I pick up is actually like really heavy when I'm like going back and forth and making my meals and just small little things like that. And then I'll wear weights during the day when I'm out doing errands. And so that's giving me some, weight bearing exercise. And I think just it's the little things that you do consistently that can really have the biggest effects. Um, yeah, I'm all about that. I'm sure there's other examples that will come to me, but those are some examples.
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting you touched on clothing. So I
Hmm.
have done a significant amount of shifting with clothing I wear. And I learned, and this comes from all the way back in scriptural times, like you look in different scriptures around the world of different religious practices. And it keeps coming up where you have linen, which is 100% pure linen for the warm weather, right? So it's breathable. And then wool. Now you could do linen in the cold weather too, like you talked about, just to don't worry about it and get the hermetic shift from the stress. But linen has a 5,000 point energy add to your body when you wear it.
Mm.
Polyester, anything polyester has a negative 3,000. It's hammering away at the hormonal system. Cotton is 100 points, which is your body is at 100 points. So it's neutral, it doesn't take away, doesn't add to you. And if you mix cotton with linen, it takes it away, it drops it down. The lower denominator will always draw it down. Polyesters of any kind, any synthetics, will draw it down to the 3,000 below if it's in there. And wool does not mix with linen. And you got to have the high-end wool. It's got to be like the cashmeres and the merinos. And, you could do alpaca. I mean, that would be the same, similar. But it's adding 5,000 points of energy into your system when you do it. It doesn't matter the color. Color is going to be, and the style, it can be whatever the style is. But you got to get high quality stuff, otherwise it's all wrinkled. But so the clothing thing is so big. And so my bed is 100% pure linen. And the sheets are heavy. I don't even use a blanket. I wear linen pajamas, 100% pure linen pajamas. And I go under my linen sheet and it's all I need. It's really interesting. And so there's a big deal. I noticed a significant shift because men, they produce way less testosterone if they're using any kind of polyesters. And look at the world we live in. Look at the Lululemons and Spanx and all these companies that put out all these synthetics. Like, you don't have to. You could have exactly the same wear. Linen breathes way better than any polyester wicking garbage. And it just makes all the difference in the world. So have you ever heard of that before?
I have not. My mind is being blown right now. Wow. What about silk?
Nope.
Like that, because I have silk
Really,
sheets.
no, it's really low, really low.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it doesn't have it because there's a measurement of it. It's just silk is like a natural synthetic, but it's not. It is natural. It's definitely better than polyester. Like silk is going to be far superior to polyester, but silk
Mhm.
is running like below cotton. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. I've never come across this. Um, the closest I've come to approaching it is, I mean, I've done a lot of episodes and touched on a lot of topics. When I interviewed Matt Simon for his book, A Poison Like None Other, all about microplastics. Oh. I could not unread that. I read that and I was like, there's plastic in everything. That's when I realized, like, I mean, I know this is obvious, but I was like, glitter is plastic, like my favorite thing. Um, but that, yeah, so that's the closest I've come to thinking about that is the role of plastics in our clothing, which that blew my mind because I didn't realize how much of clothing is plastic. It's kind of
Mhm.
shocking.
You can get undergarments of linen as well. You just have to look for it, and it's actually beautiful. There's a company called 120% Linen, And when I
Okay.
ran into them, because I'd been hearing this stuff, right? And I had all different
Mhm.
types of clothing because it's more of a fashion thing for people. Then I found out you're going to get absolutely beautiful clothing, but it's expensive. That's okay. It happens to last a lifetime. So the more you wash it, the softer it gets.
Oh.
You never wash it in anything but cold water. It doesn't like heat. Interesting, right? You never iron it because that will heat up the fabric and break it. But the longer you have it, the more comfortable it gets, the softer, the more. It's just like one of these crazy things. And so I changed everything. And it cost many, many thousands of dollars to change. And I've got like literally racks of all these high-end designer, pieces, pants, shirts, suits, and all this stuff is all done. Even socks. So I'm like, can you get linen socks? Yes, you can. And they hang in there. They don't wear out. They don't have odor because your feet are breathing.
Hmm.
So this is a massive upgrade anyway. So it's just an interesting
That's,
little tidbit.
I'm gonna have to I'm having flashbacks to when I had to overhaul my skincare and makeup when I realized how toxic that is conventionally. And I mean, that was more probably affordable than this clothing journey, but I think it can be really overwhelming to people because you have this epiphany about this change you need to make. So like with me, the skincare makeup, with you, the clothing, but you can do it, you know, you don't have to do it all at once and you can go slow and you can just make a commitment to only bring in, now that you have this new knowledge, only bring
Mhm.
in, what you want going forward. And then you'll get rid of the others. Or you can switch it all at once, I guess, if you if you're an extremist, kind of like me.
Yeah,
But
well, yeah, you could. You have to have the resources to do it, though.
yeah, true. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, oh, I love that. I'm gonna have to look more into that. Thank you. That's
Yeah, that's a
fascinating.
fun one. And you still get to have the exact styles you like. You just go and get them tailored. Or if you go
Yeah.
to 120% linen, I'm not promoting them. I don't have any affiliation with them at all. I probably should. But you go there and they have all the women's beautiful, like the sundresses and all that stuff is just awesome. It's so good. So,
I'm
but
gonna
there's
check
only a
them out.
few flagship stores. It comes out of Italy. It's all made in Italy.
I'm checking them out like
Yeah.
right after this. Thank you.
Yes, yeah,
Awesome.
my pleasure. So, so what are there any other things you could think of that are really going to have an impact for people who are listening today? Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention, and I
Mhm.
love this. I've been observing you in your conversation, and the one thing I've noticed that you have eliminated the vast majority of verbal viruses out of your conversation, out of your dialogue. And here's one of them. I think this is the biggest one, the biggest verbal virus in the world, and you'll see it everywhere. And when I tell you about this, you're going to see it everywhere from now on. So you can't unsee it.
I'm
Uh,
excited to
you,
hear. I'm so excited right now. Okay.
yeah, it's a simple one. You're going to go like, "Oh, really?" Because you're already doing it correctly, by the way. So when people refer to people, they objectify them. Everyone's learned with their language to objectify things. Like if I said to you, the people that I have on my podcast, they're into biohacking. People that I have conversations with all the time, they're into being healthy. What was wrong with what I just said? I had a word in there that was completely incorrect.
Oh, a
And
specific word?
yep,
So is it
start,
there?
starts with a T and ends with a T. That. Because
That I have on
that
my.
is an object. If I said, yeah, I had a conversation with Melanie, and she's one of those people that loves biohacking. No, you're not. You're not a that. You're a who. I would say Melanie
Mm.
Avalon is a person who loves biohacking, a person who is very healthy, a person who is very high vibe. As soon as I say that subconsciously, in my mind and your mind, I'm
Hmm.
objectifying you instead of
Wow.
personifying you, right? So you have been personifying people the whole time. Every time I listened and you talked about people, you always referred to them as who. So it was already in you, which is really good.
I love this job. I love, okay, you call them verbal viruses. That's wonderful. I think my favorite one is and I'm gonna know, like you said, once you learn something like that, then you see it everywhere. So I'm gonna be seeing that everywhere. That everywhere. but it's
Yeah.
actually a that. So it's okay. Um, I I love the but and one. So
Mm,
anytime I want to say the word but, I ask myself, am I just negating what I said right before that? And do I actually need to use the word and? And if I can't use the word and, probably means that what I'm saying isn't holding truth because
mm.
I'm just saying something and then I'm undoing it and saying something else. So how can I say it
Right.
differently? It's a game changer for me.
It is. Like if I said, well, I met Melanie Avalon and she's an amazing this, and this,
But
but what? But what?
yeah. Yeah.
Because right away I'm going to say something negative.
Hmm.
Right. Because the but is the flip into the negative space. And I can find fault with anybody, and I can also find 1,000 times more awesome things about them that are faults, that are not faults, right? It's just things that are 10%, maybe it's the 90-10 rule, 80-20 rule, whatever they want to call it. But if somebody's 70-30, okay, they're not going to hang out because they have too many things. But we're all, we're 90-10 or higher. And there's always things that are going to be our little idiosyncrasies and things that we could do better. And it's something that we're always improving. So I think that word but, yeah, it's a really good one. I actually have never, ever heard someone say that but, because I always hear like the and, so, like, as, or if I say to you, I tell you something that is informative and we're having a conversation and I say to you, do you know what I mean? Or I want you to understand. Or does this make sense to you? I was like, hold it. That's immediately me telling you subconsciously that I don't think you're that bright, that there's something
Mm.
wrong. And so when people say, does that make sense? I usually say, well, I'm more interested in making dollars actually. Cents don't really cut it. They don't.
I'm gonna
In
start
Canada, they
noticing
took the,
one. Oh
yeah.
man,
But,
I love this. We could do a whole episode on verbal viruses. This is fun.
oh yeah,
I
we
love
should.
it.
We should. We will.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it's all part of our health and how we're expressing how people are seeing us. If I kept saying, I'm explaining something and then I'm going, well, yeah, like immediately that I don't really know what I'm talking about at the depth that I could, or maybe I really do. But because I have these viruses that got into me because everyone does this, I picked up on it because we will pick up on the lingo of people around us. And
Hmm.
the first time you hear something is like, I remember back in the day when everybody go, yeah, big time. And I thought, big time what? And then I caught myself like in 2 years saying, yeah, big time. It's like, big time what, Dad? So anyway. So yeah, then the viruses that are mental, like what we saw happen in 2020, instantaneous mental viruses. There was no virus in the air. The government's tried to tell everybody there's a virus in the air and you have to do all this stupid stuff. And of course, I never paid attention to it. But it's a mental virus is deadly. And it involves anxiety and depression and fear. This whole world is so fear driven. And the one thing I noticed, even in the health space, it's the age old formula. If you want to conquer people, you got to divide and conquer. You got to create sides. You got to create, I'm right, you're wrong. Or I believe this is true and now you have to believe it because I believe it. It's like, if I try to come and do that with you, then I have to open up and let you do that with me, or I now have to believe what you believe because you believe it. And we could be totally opposite at that particular time because we're both looking at things from a slightly different angle. Neither of us are incorrect. We both have an element of reality within it. But the whole forcefulness of, you should follow me. No, you should follow you. And it's my job to simply share things that I've learned that help you follow you better and not me.
Yeah, I think, and I related to that, I think one of the biggest epiphanies and paradigm shifts I've had personally is realizing that every time, every time I say that, I'm like, wait, did I say that correctly? Every time I feel offended, it is something about me. It is not the other person. And having that realization is, it's so freeing and enlightening and helpful. Um, because it's not the other person. There's something in me that I'm offended by clearly, that I'm triggered by, afraid of. It's
Hmm.
something I need to work on. So that's really helpful for me.
Right. Yeah, we trigger each other. And if I can trigger you, then you know that there's just something that's just not quite dialed in yet all the way. We all still get triggered. I get triggered sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's definitely, and I've learned to be more chill, be more on my parasympathetic at that particular time, and just go into that resting. It's okay. I'll always laugh. I mean, I'll literally laugh because I can't. I mean, what else are you going to do? Get angry? Get frustrated? Get upset? No, it's that if we get upset enough, scientifically, it takes 72 hours for those anger, anxiety, frustration hormones to go and settle back down again. We literally cannot afford to have a freak out at all, no matter how bad the situation is. Because the whole thing is that's all about getting, triggering you. So that's, I think, a big part of our autonomic nervous system, keeping ourselves in the rest and digest as much as we can. And I stopped using the term sympathetic stress. I was taught this. Sympathetic is awesome. You want to be in the sympathetic phase of your autonomic nervous system when you're laughing at a joke, when you're out having fun with your friends, when you're cruising around driving, when you're going and getting the groceries, when you're shopping for clothes, when you're doing the tasks of the different chores in your life. You want to be fully in sympathetic. And it's not stress. The only stress comes if you don't get out of it and go into parasympathetic. Then you can get stressed. But it's not sympathetic stress. So again, terminology is a big thing, or PTSD. People talk about PTSD and trauma. Come on. Post-trauma syndrome is a real thing, but it's not a disorder. This is post-trauma syndrome. And when you get the trauma out of your mind and your emotions and your body, and then it just disappears and you forget that it existed, but it can be done. And that's, I think, a really big part of our health journey, is to have all the post-trauma syndrome of any kind, any trauma removed, but not focusing on the trauma. Just going, hey, it's got to go, right? It's just got to go, one way or another.
I love it. I love it. I really appreciate how you see the world. It's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, we're learning a little more all the time. So we get to learn from people who have really studied it, and then we can absorb, and then we put together. It's like putting together master keys. I never came up with one of them, but I got to put them together. You've actually been gathering master keys yourself in your journey, because a master key removes the problem. Then you don't need all these pharmaceuticals or nutraceuticals or supplements, because those symptoms are gone because the problem is gone. Whereas if we're just if we don't deal with the problem and we just suppress symptoms, then we never, and people talk about root cause, but I talk about root cause. There's at the very drill all the way down. Come on, guys, let's drill all the way down and let's find out what the actual problem is. And then you systematically remove them. And then your whole life entirely changes. So, all right. So do you have anything encouraging you could tell the audience right now from your heart that would help them on their journey?
I really want, and we touched on this throughout the conversation, but the role of acceptance and also agency. So whatever you're going through, health condition wise, suffering wise, situation you don't want to be in wise, that is okay. Like, first of all, I think just understanding that's okay. It's okay to be there. Because I know for me personally, and you also mentioned this earlier about blaming other people, blaming yourself, things like that. Not you were talking about not doing that. I know for me, I can be like really hard on myself and blame myself for things. And so just knowing that whatever state you're in, that is okay to be there. And also that there are so many answers out there and you can find them and you can take agency, and it's all there for the taking and for the learning. So just keep going. Like we said earlier, do the small things every day that, really resonate with you. And we also talked about all the clutter and how there's just so much. You were talking about signal to noise ratio. So it's also okay to try all the things and to keep what resonates and remove what doesn't. You don't have to do all the things all the time. You can do the things that you want to do most of the time. Yeah, so that's what I would like to, and all, like with the laughter too. You mentioned the laughter, laughter and gratitude.
Right.
They really help.
Yeah, very much for sure. Well, I appreciate that. That was a really good cap off, and I look forward to more conversations in the future. I'd love to have you back on again and talk about many other different subjects and even go deeper into what we've been talking about today. And we've, run out of time because we both have to go. And time flew by really quick. I'm surprised at
I know.
Yeah.
This was amazing. And I can't wait. You're going to come on my show. I can't wait. And we can talk even more then. So, and I'll see you hopefully in Vegas in December. So many things. This is
Yes.
wonderful. It's really, really nice to meet you. It's been
Yeah, it's been
amazing.
lovely. Yeah, likewise. Yeah, really pleasurable. All right. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up, everyone, and make sure you go back and listen to where you have to. We'll do summaries on these on this interview as well, so you can have a really highlight summary in text. And I look forward to seeing you again, Melanie. And thank you, everyone, for investing your time in yourself and for making your life better every single day.